Okay, everyone. Welcome. So, like I said, those of you that are just joining us, if you quickly want to just answer those three questions in the chat, you can. But like I said, it's voluntary, so you don't necessarily have to. I do ask, though, that after you're done with those questions, if you refrain from writing in the chat, I want to make sure that we keep the chat to people just answering the questions that I'm asking, okay? Because I don't want to lose anyone's responses. All right. So now that we've started, if you can just cease with the chat, that'd be great. Okay. All right. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and answer those questions for you right now. My name is Mr. Privatera. My hobby is I like to go around to the different festivals and things in Orlando. Orlando has a lot of stuff to do. I like to go to, the different festivals and stuff. Of course, this year that's been a little tricky with everything being canceled, but really that's my main hobby. I would love to travel to probably the Far East, so probably Japan, China, Vietnam. One of my favorite places that I visited is just this past January. I went to Iceland. That was really neat. It was freezing in January, but there was lots of waterfalls and black sand beaches and really neat things to see out there. So maybe someday you'll make it. All right, so Burr is right. It was cold. Okay, so welcome to our first live lesson. Thank you so much for coming, guys. I really appreciate it. The main topic for today is how to read a map. Okay, so it's kind of that 1.01, 1.02 lessons. And what we're really going to do is focus on a skill that I think a lot of kids your age don't necessarily have developed fully. So we want to make sure that we really hone in on the ability to read a map and that you're able to do that, because there's going to be quite a few questions on your Module 1 test about how to read a map. Okay, so we want to make sure that we give you a good kind of background so that you can do well on that test. Okay. We're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about primary and secondary sources, just to kind of get that straightened out, because I think some kids are a little confused about the difference there too. Okay. All right, so there are obviously those Florida standards that everything we do, has to be based on what the state says we need to make sure that kids know. So here are some of the things that we're talking about today that go along with what the state of Florida says that kids your age need to know about world history. Basically, it's understanding how to use maps, right? How are maps significant and what do they show us? Can you point things out on a map, right? And then also different migrations of people using maps. Okay, so hopefully when we're done, you'll have a little bit of an understanding of some of these things. Okay, so at this time, guys, right now, what I want you to do, if you could just answer it once for me and just put it right in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 4, how well do you rate your knowledge of reading and analyzing maps? So 1 would be, I don't know anything about maps, and 4 would be, I can probably tell you everything you need to know about a map when I see it. Okay, so if you just want to go ahead, I'll give you a couple seconds here to put in your number, where you think you fall. Okay, I see mostly 2s, I see a couple 1s, I see some 3s. So good. That's kind of where I thought a lot of you would be, especially a lot of you in that 2 range. I think this will help you being here. So thank you for coming. All right. So first, we're going to kind of get to the maps thing. But first, I want you to kind of think about this question. How do we know about what happened so long ago in the past? How do we know about what happened a really, really, really long time ago? Someone said historians. Well, how would a historian know, right? How do we know Mr. Priv isn't just lying to us, since all this stuff happened long before he was born? I am 36. I was not alive during ancient Egypt, right? So how is it that we know about ancient Egypt? How do we know what happened then? Well, I'm going to tell you. The answer is, and I see somebody actually has the right answer. So good job. Primary and secondary sources, right? So we learn about the past because there are primary and secondary sources that we study, okay? This is how we learn. So what are primary and secondary sources? Some of you are saying artifacts. Artifacts is actually one of these. Artifacts is a primary source. So a primary source is something that was created during the time that is being studied, right? It's something that comes directly from that time period. Okay? So think of it this way. Is it original? Is it from the source, right? Has it not been, have other people not had their hands on it, essentially, right? If it's something that comes directly from the time period, right, that you're looking at, then it's a primary source, okay? If I find a tool from, the 1800s, if I'm looking at the 1800s, that would be a primary source, right? It is from that time. If I look at my textbook at school and they show me a picture of a tool, I can still see it. I know what it is, but that's a secondary source because that textbook is not from the 1800s, right? The actual tool is. So hopefully that helps clarify a little bit. We're going to talk about it some more. I know it gets a little confusing, okay? So a secondary source is something that's created after the fact, not from that actual time. Also, another way to think about it is that it pulls information from lots of different places, right? It might take information from here, and put it together in one spot. Then we know it's a secondary source as well, okay? So primary sources come from that time period, right? Created at the time. Secondary source comes after the fact, all right? So let's think about these things. What I want you to do, guys, is I want you to put a P if you think it's primary or an S if you think it's secondary in the chat, okay? So the first question I'm kind of posing is letters, right? A letter written from someone to someone else. Dear so-and-so, right? Is that a primary source or secondary source? If you think it's primary, put a P in the chat. If you think it's secondary, put an S in the chat. Okay, good. Looks like most people agree that it's primary. So let's see. I would agree, right? Obviously, if the letter is from the time period that you're looking at, right, it's a primary source, okay? That letter was created at that time. Letters are a great way to learn about history, right? Back a long time ago, people used to write letters to each other all the time, right? It's a great way to learn about how people lived and what kind of resources or technology they had, right? Great way to learn, and lots of historians do learn from letters. All right, what about interviews? An interview, what do you think? Put a P if you think it's primary, an S if you think it's secondary. Okay, I see lots of secondary sources. An interview is actually a primary source. Stumped you. So when you think about it, guys, an interview is really going to be someone who was there experiencing it, right? And they're passing their story on. So that interview is from a person who was there. Now, technically, you could interview someone who wasn't present at a situation, but then usually you wouldn't interview them at all. So really, an interview is going to be a primary source, okay? You are talking to someone who was there experiencing that event at that time, okay? Textbooks. All right, so great way, guys, to think about textbooks is to think about the fact that it takes lots of information from here, there, and everywhere and puts it together in one place for you. And so I said if it does that, it's a secondary source. So a textbook is going to be a secondary source, okay? It's a great way to learn about history, right? Secondary sources are fine, but they just don't come right from that time period, right? The guy who wrote about Christopher Columbus in your textbook was not there to actually see Christopher Columbus, okay? So that's going to be a secondary source. All right, an autobiography. An autobiography is a book that someone writes about their own life. What do we think there? Primary or secondary? Great. Looks like we're pretty unanimous on the fact that it's a primary source, and I would agree, right? Are you present for your entire life? Yes, right? I mean, unless you have some out-of-body experience, right? You were present for your entire life, so that's definitely going to be a primary source. All right. Magazine articles. What do we think about that? Remember, guys, let's just use the chat for just what we're talking about in class here. Okay, you see lots of secondaries. Secondary. Okay, so everyone agrees that it's pretty much secondary. I would agree. Okay, remember a magazine article, right, is usually written by a journalist, right, not someone who necessarily experienced it firsthand. Okay, but someone who is writing about it to pass it along later on. All right, the next one, diary entry. All right, you guys got this, right? A diary entry, primary source, right? Just like kind of like a letter, right? The person who's writing that diary was there at that time. It is from that time that it was written. Excellent. All right, next one. Biographies, a book written about someone else's life. All right, mostly I see secondary, and I would agree, right? There's no way that you were present every second of someone else's life, right? So that's going to be a secondary source. All right, great job. Newspaper articles. All right, I'm seeing mostly secondary sources for this one, and I would agree. A newspaper article would be a secondary source, right? Once again, that reporter who's writing the story maybe was there, but most likely that reporter was not there, so it's going to be a secondary source. Okay. Also, guys, think about it this way too. Newspapers compile a whole bunch of information, right? Information from here, there, and everywhere else, and puts it into one place, which is going to make it a secondary source. This one's tricky. Photographs. What do we think? Is a photograph a primary or a secondary source? All right. I see lots of primaries, and I would agree, right? A photo, you can't take a picture of something that already happened in the past, right? You can only take a picture of something at that moment, at that time. So a photograph is always going to be a primary source. All right. An encyclopedia, and for those of you that don't know what that is, think like the book version of Wikipedia. Is that going to be primary or secondary source, right? It's just a whole bunch of volumes of books that's written on a variety of different topics. Good. So Wikipedia, what does it do? It compiles a whole bunch of information, stuff from everywhere, and puts together in one spot. That's going to be secondary for sure. Okay. And a documentary, like those wonderful Netflix documentaries, maybe you watch those, right? What would a documentary be? Correct. Wikipedia isn't trustworthy, but either way, it would still be secondary. All right. So a documentary, what is documentary? Primary or secondary? Looks like I stumped you. Because a documentary is actually secondary. Okay. Documentary is secondary because a couple reasons. One, it's going to have, interviews and photographs and film footage, right? A whole bunch of different things compiled into one place. Okay. And the person who's making the documentary most likely wasn't there, right? They might do different reasons. They might have different people that were there, right? But the documentary as a whole is going to be a secondary source. Okay. All right. Next, a birth certificate. Good. I see lots of people putting primary, and I would agree, right? Anything that's an official record is going to be a primary source. Okay. If it's an official record for something, it is always going to be primary. Meeting notes. Somebody who takes notes on a meeting. Good. You guys, for the most part, you got this, right? Good. Meeting notes are also going to be primary because the person taking the notes, right? The notes come from that time, that meeting. Here's the hardest one. What do we think about music? Is music primary or secondary? My morning group didn't do very well in this one. Let's see if my afternoon group does better. What do we think? Is music primary or secondary? I agree. It is primary or secondary. It's one of the two, yes. Which one is it? Okay, here's a little trick for you guys. Any art form, whether it's music or poetry or, even poem or poetry or fashion even, right? Anything that's an art form is always going to be primary, right? A painting is always primary, so music is always primary, okay? So any art form is always going to be primary, all right? And then finally, guys, our last one, essays. You write an essay like for a class, right? Or you read a professional essay, right? What is an essay going to be, primary or secondary? All right, I'm seeing some answers for both here. An essay, once again, is going to compile information, right? Take a little information from here, from there, and kind of put it all together. So that's going to be secondary also. Okay, so just a couple things to think about, guys. Some of the ones that I think kind of fooled people a little bit, right? That's going to be music. Music is a primary source. It's an art form. Essays are secondary. Okay, and then kind of Wikipedia, right? That compiles a bunch of information together. It's going to be secondary, right? But otherwise, you guys did pretty good, right? Interviews also. Remember, interviews are going to be primary, sharing their experience of what they talked about, okay? As when they talk about it in an interview. All right, so moving on from that, right? So in your modules, guys, in 1.01, I think, it kind of lists some primary, secondary sources to be aware of. So a lot of these are the same ones we just talked about, okay? Interviews, autobiographies, diary entries, right? Meeting notes or meeting minutes, birth certificates, right? Secondary sources over here, a lot of the same things that we just talked about, textbooks, biographies, okay? I do want to draw your attention to one thing, though. In Florida Virtual School, it does, or Orange County Virtual School, it does tell you here that maps are a primary source. I don't know. I would actually usually consider maps a secondary source because it compiles information from lots of different places, right, on a map. If it's a map that, say, Columbus drew of the island Hispaniola on his first trip there, then that comes right from that time, and that would probably be primary, right? But generally, maps are usually, I've always seen it considered as secondary. But for whatever reason, from your modules, it lists it as primary. So hopefully that's not something on the test that'll confuse you. But just know that that's kind of a little difference of opinion there. Okay. Guys, keep in mind, please don't put random things in the chats, because I don't know if people are having questions for me or questions for each other. Okay, we'll leave the chat clear unless it's a question posed by me. Thanks. Okay, so now we're going to get into the maps part, right? Why are maps important to history? All right, it is very important that you guys know how to read these maps, especially when it comes time for your test. All right, so the first thing you need to look at are the elements of the map. What are the different parts of the map, okay? Obviously, the first thing you want to look at is the title, right? The title will tell you what the map is about. In this case, guys, the title is right here in this box, okay? This box in this case is also called a legend or a key. But sometimes you'll see the title is in the key. Sometimes the title might be at the top of the map, okay? But usually it's pretty obvious what is the title of the map. In this case, this map that we're using as an example is the civilizations of Mesoamerica and South America. Okay, so these would be the Native American civilizations from a couple hundred years ago. Okay, so what we're going to look at after you find the title is the scale. Okay, the scale is going to basically tell you how zoomed in or zoomed out that map is, okay? So the bigger the scale, the bigger the numbers, the more zoomed out that map is. The smaller the numbers, the more zoomed in you're looking at, Okay, so in this case, right, it says that this line here tells you that this is about 1,000 miles. Okay, that's a lot. So this map is pretty zoomed out, right? This is a large area that it's covering. Okay, if I want to see how long this river is right here, right, I can use this scale. I'm going to try to take the same amount of distance, right, and kind of place it over the map here. So if I see that this is about 1,000 miles, I'm going to say 1,000 is about here, and then you have this, which is about another half of that. So 1,500 miles probably is the length of this river. And I know that because I'm looking at this little bar right here that's called the scale, okay, to get the distance of that river. All right. Now, if I could show you, right, I usually just kind of take your hand like this, measure the scale, and then kind of put it along the river or the coastline or whatever it is you're trying to measure. Okay, that'll give you a good indication of how long or how far apart two things are. And we're going to practice that in a little bit. All maps do not use miles. Some will use kilometers. They'll use some form of distance. Okay, but it can be miles or kilometers based on where the map comes from usually. Okay, in the United States, we use miles. So I'm assuming, although I could be wrong, that on your test, you'll probably see it in miles. Okay. All right. Now, the other thing you need to look at is the legend. The legend here is this whole box. In this particular one, the legend includes the title, but also the legend is going to tell you what the things are on that map. So this one says, look, if there's a star, that means it's the capital city of that empire. If it's a dot, that just means it was another city in that empire. Okay, so you'll see here Chichen Itza, the city in the Mayan Empire. Chichen Itza is not a capital; it's just a regular city. Okay, these cities here are the capital cities because they have stars. So the legend is very important because it tells you what it is you're looking at on the map. Okay, so it does seem a little bit like a science lesson because science and social studies both use maps. So there's a little bit of a crossover there. I would agree. Okay, now. Let's look at this map, okay? This is a different map, right? It shows the continent of Africa. Now here, the title, right? The title of this map, I know it's kind of small and blurry, right? But it says Africa Physical. And we're going to talk in a moment what physical means, all right? The scale, where is the scale on this map? Right here. See it down in the corner? Now, this one, right, looks like it's even more zoomed out than the last one. Okay, so you want to kind of gauge how big of an area we're talking here. All right, now the legend right here, okay, it tells us what we're looking at in this particular map. In this case, the legend tells us, right, elevation. So it'll tell us how high or low the landforms are. So in the green area here, right, we see that it's very flat or low-lying land. In this yellowish brown area, we'll see that it's much more mountainous, right? Because it's darker color. So that's, and I only know that because the legend tells me. If I didn't have this legend, I would have no idea what these colors mean, okay? So that's why it's very, very, very important. Do you mean these triangles here? I'm assuming these triangles are just arrows that point to the different things you should look at. Okay. All right. So, the next thing we're going to talk about is longitude and latitude lines, okay? And this can be a little bit tricky. Some of you hopefully have heard this before. Some of you this may be the first time you're ever hearing about it. I know they do talk about it in the modules, which is good. So hopefully it's at least your second time hearing it. So if you look at maps are generally divided along lines, right? And so is a globe, to kind of give you a position on the Earth of where you are. So there's two types of lines. There's the lines that run east and west, and then the lines that run north and south. The east and west lines, right, are the ones that are called latitude lines. Okay, so these ones that run this way along the map, these are all latitude lines. Okay, longitude lines are the ones that go north to south. They run long ways up and down the map. Okay, so you have kind of left, right, and then up, down. These lines that move, that show, that go left to right, these latitude lines, they're the ones that are going to, where you can kind of tell if it's in the northern part of the world or the lower part, southern part of the world, okay? The lines that go long ways, you're going to be able to tell if that's the eastern side of the world or the western side of the world. And we will talk more about that in another slide that might clear it up a little bit. Okay. Yeah, longitude is up and down. That's correct, right? It's the one that goes long around. Long. If you look latitude lines, some of them, when you get by the poles, are actually really small. They're not very long, right? Longitude lines are always the same length because they go from top to bottom. Okay, so this slide here kind of tells you, right? So these latitude lines are the ones that go east to west, right? And you see how some of them are a lot smaller, right, than the others. These longitude lines are going to be the same size, right, going up and down around the globe, okay? Now, if you look, these latitude lines, the one that's right in the middle, right, that cuts the Earth right through the middle, that's the equator, right? The latitude line that's the halfway point, essentially, is called the equator. The longitude line here, that's the halfway point, is called the prime meridian, okay? So you have a great way to kind of divide the Earth in half, right? Using the equator, the latitude line, you have the north hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. If you use the prime meridian and cut the Earth in half this way, then you have the western hemisphere and you have the eastern hemisphere. So if you look at Florida, where we are right here, we are located in the northern hemisphere and we're located down here in the western hemisphere. Okay, so we're in the northwestern hemisphere. Okay, we're north of the equator and we're west of that prime meridian line. Okay. Okay, now, a lot of you hopefully know this as well. So you have a compass on maps too, usually, and that will kind of orient you and tell you which direction things are located. So in this particular case, and in most cases, you will see a compass that looks like this, right? North, east, southwest, okay? Sometimes kids like little acronyms, right? They might say, never eat soggy waffles, right? Or never eat shredded wheat. That's what we used to say as kids, that adult cereal that nobody liked, right? So, but you can remember it that way, or some kids just kind of know that it's north, south is down here, east and west. All right. Now, it's important to realize that that this might not always be in this direction. Sometimes it can be tilted a little bit, right? But usually it's kind of straight up and down. But if you see one tilted, it's probably like that for a reason, but just keep in mind, right, that the cardinal points is pretty important. You want to make sure that you are aware which directions north, south, east, and west, okay? So on a map, guys, if it says which mountain range is east of this mountain range, right, you need to know that you're looking for a mountain range that's east on this side of this mountain range here, okay? So you need to kind of know the general direction that you're going. Okay, so let's go back to longitude and latitude for a minute, and let's talk about how do we find a location on a map based on longitude and latitude, okay? So right here, it says, which of the following is closest to the cardinal or to the coordinates 30 degrees north latitude and 0 degrees longitude? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look and try to find the 30-degree north line. Now, I understand that this is a little bit blurry sometimes when you zoom in on it, but if you look, 30 degrees is going to be right up here, okay? This is the 30-degree line, okay? Now, the next thing that it says is 0 degrees longitude, which is the prime meridian. So we need to look down here and see where is the prime meridian, or 0 degrees, which we find is this line here, okay? So we have this line here as 0 degrees, and this line here is 30 degrees. So we just need to look and see where those lines intersect, right? 30 degrees is here, 0 degrees is here, and it intersects right where that star is located, okay? So now we have kind of an indication as to where we are on this map. So the question says, which of the following is closest to that location, right? Which one of these, go ahead and type in your answers, guys, in the chat, right? Which one of them is closest to that point? Guys, a lot of you aren't answering the question. Make sure that you're answering the questions, right? And that, good. So now I'm starting to see some answers. Good. So we went 30 degrees here and then 0 degrees here. And if you look, it's right there where the Atlas Mountains are. Okay, great, which is B. There we go. Oops, sorry. So I just gave away the answer. Hopefully nobody saw it. All right, so here's your pop quiz. According to the map, right, which of the following countries can be found at 60 degrees north and 40 degrees east? So go ahead and look at that map as closely as you can. You might have to, put your face right in your screen, right? But what can be found at 60 degrees north, 40 degrees east? What country? Go ahead and put your answer in the chat. Okay, good. So the answer is Russia. Look, here's the 60 degrees north line, and then here's the 40 degrees east line, right? They intersect right here, which is where Russia is located. Okay, everybody sees that? All right, so let's try another one. Which of the following coordinates corresponds to a body of water? So I'm looking for the one where when those points intersect each other, it intersects not on land, but on water. So go ahead and take a second, right? Try to find and see where it would fall. Good, I see lots of C's. So let's see. Good. If you guys had followed all of these coordinates, right? A intersects way over here, like where the last one was. B down here by Spain. Okay. C is here in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the North Atlantic Ocean. So C is definitely the correct answer. And then D would put you over here in Russia as well. All right. So your answer should have been C. Good job. Most people got that right. Okay. Now this one confused my morning group. So hopefully look at it carefully. Hopefully we'll do well on this one. Okay. It says based on the migration patterns shown in the map, which is true of which of the following statements is most likely true? Okay, so look at those different choices. Look at that map carefully. Okay, which one of these statements is going to be true? When you think you have an answer, go ahead and put it in the chat. Okay. Yeah. So if you look, guys, basically this is the migration of humans, right? According to what we know about history, the human race started kind of in Central Africa, right? And then from there, people migrated kind of in this pattern here across the entire world. All right. So basically what this map is asking you is, can you follow the directions of these arrows, right? So basically they're saying that it started in Africa and then went to Asia. So it's saying the culture and people was influenced by Africa, right? The ones that existed in Asia was influenced by Africa. We know that because the arrows run that direction. Okay. So hopefully that was clear. Okay. People who migrated to South America had a different culture than those from North America. No, I'd probably argue no, right? Because the lines are basically the same, right? You have to go from North America into South America, so it's probably very similar. And then the culture of the people in Africa include traits from people living in Australia and Europe. If that was the case, right, from here to here, influencing here, the arrows would have to be going the other direction. Okay. All right. Now we're going to talk about the different types of maps. There are 3 main different types of maps. The first one is a political map. Then there's physical maps and special purpose maps. So let's talk about political maps first. It says political maps show the boundaries of the countries, states, and or even counties, right? The location of major cities, and they usually have the names of major bodies of water. What I usually tell kids is, if I'm looking at the Earth from outer space, looking down, I'm not going to see a political map, right? It's a political map usually has all the man-made borders and man-made stuff, okay? Cities and countries and things like that. Now, a physical map, on the other hand, is going to show us the physical features of the Earth, right? Landforms, mountains, rivers, deserts. If I'm up in the space station, right, and I look down at the Earth, right, then I would see what looks much more like a physical map, okay? So physical is more the natural stuff, political is more the man-made stuff, okay? That map we looked at earlier, that was a political map. It showed the boundaries of different Native American empires, right? That's similar to a country today. So it would be very much a political map, all right? Now, someone asked me in the morning class, yes, it is possible that something can be both a physical and political map if it has mountains and rivers and it has the countries, right? But they're not going to do anything like that for you on a test to confuse you, okay? So you're going to, it's going to be one or the other. Then, guys, this other type of map is a special purpose map. Special purpose maps show information geared towards a specific theme. One example could be leaders over time of an empire, right? Now, maybe it would say, here are the different states in the United States, right? Each one uses a different amount of water, right? The darker the color, the more water that state uses, okay? So it's going to be geared specifically at one factor that it's trying to get you to know, okay? So it's not going to be just a general, here's a map with the states, or here's mountains and rivers, right? It's going to have other information on it, right? Or maybe it would be, countries with the most people living over the age of 90, right? The darker the color, the more people that live over the age of 90. All right, so hopefully that kind of gives you an indication of the three different types of maps. Okay, so what category does this map fall into? Be careful, read first before you give an answer, okay? Yeah, I'm sorry, I know it's a little small. I'm gonna work on that for next time. Okay, good. Most people think it's B, and I would agree, right? Now, the A tries to trick you, right? It says because it shows you which civilization was more important. There's no way from looking at this that you can tell which one is more important than the other, okay? I don't know if the Aztecs were more important than the Incas. I have no idea, okay? So you're going to want to make sure that you realize that there's only so much you can tell from a political map, okay? And that something you can tell is where capital cities were located, okay? Good. All right. This next one, guys, is which of these statements is true about Christianity? When you look at this map of Europe, which statement is true? Okay, this one, like I said, it's another case of it being kind of small, but if you want to look, you can. So it was limited to the empire's boundaries right before 325 CE. It expanded into Asia Minor between 325 AD and 476 CE. It spread to Britain, Spain, and Gaul after 476 CE, or its spread was limited by the Mediterranean Sea. Remember, this is another one where it's important to look at the legend or the key, right? You want to make sure that you know what those different colors mean. Like I said, this one's kind of hard. I agree. This one's a little tricky. So a lot of you are putting D, but if you look, right, Christianity did spread to the other side of the Mediterranean Sea. So it wouldn't be that, right? It's that it expanded into Asia Minor, this area here between those 2 years, right? There's light and dark green in there, which means it happened, in between those 2 times there. Like I said, it's a little tricky. It's all right for now. All right, so where is this city? The city that's hard to pronounce, right? Where is it located? Is it in the north, the south, the east, or the west? Go ahead and try to find it on that map and tell me where is it located. Good. If you look, the city's located right here, and that's on the east part of the map. Okay. Southeast. Okay, sure. I guess maybe I would consider that, but that's not an option, so I'd pick east. It's more due east. All right. Now, this one, once again, like I said, it's kind of small. I realize that. So it's saying the approximate distance between the Bolan Pass and the Khyber Pass. You're going to see, guys, those 2 passes are right here. Okay. So we need to make sure that we look at the scale and try to figure out exactly how far apart those 2 passes are from each other. Good. I would agree that they're about 500 miles apart from each other, right? See that red line that's drawn there, right? You want to use the scale here to see it's about the same distance as one of those scales. Okay, so let's kind of reflect a little bit here and just review. So maps can be both primary or secondary sources. Remember, I would always say they're secondary, but I think the curriculum tells you that they're primary, so it's a little confusing. A map title, the scale, right? How long the distance is, and the legend, right, or the key, are very, very, very important. Make sure you always look for those things when you're looking at a map. The longitude lines, right, are the ones that are east and west of the prime meridian. They're the ones that go up and down, north and south. Okay. The latitude lines are the ones that go circular around the globe, right? They're north and south of the equator. Okay. And there are 3 types of maps: political, physical, and special purpose maps. Okay. Political maps show political boundaries, right? Countries, states. Physical maps show the physical features of the earth, like the landforms, elevations, rivers, things like that. And special purpose maps show a specific theme, right? When they want to give you information about a certain area, they put it over the land, right? Gives you information on a certain theme or topic. Okay, so now looking at that scale again, where do you fall now when you look at how well you can analyze or read a map? Go ahead and, if you want to put your number in there, I understand that it can be, it's a private thing too. If you want to put your number for all to see, you can. If you want to just think about it to yourself, you can do that as well. Okay. So where might you fall on this scale based on or after our lesson today? Okay, so thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. If not, then you're free to log out and have a great day. Thank you so much for coming. Good. If it was easy for you already, that's great. That's a good thing. That means you already knew how to read a map. Bye, guys. Like I said, if you have no other questions, have a great day. It was good seeing you all.